All right, we are live. Hello,
We
Adrian.
are hello.
Hello,
We have a very special guest today, Mr. Harpta.
Mr. Harpta, or
Mr. Harpta.
we're gonna say like Dr. Harpta. Dr.
Oh,
Harpta.
Mr. Harpta.
Paging Dr. Harp.
Uh-oh. Attilio, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Oh,
That
yeah.
sounds Attilio. We can't hear you. We have a technical interference here with Attilio and his. Okay, so, anyways, we have Brad, Mr. Harpta, on here with us today,
Morning.
answering everything that you ever wanted to know about HARPTA. Okay, so before we got started, we were talking about how we respected your focus with the HARPTA, being the HARPTA expert. You even have the website, harpta.com.
Well, and then local style. We like to talk story a little bit. Mainland, boom, straight into the business, right? But local style, we get to first of all, tell us your story. Riley, are you from here, from somewhere else?
Yeah, I was born and raised here. I grew up in Mililani.
Okay.
I graduated from Mililani School. Of course, every local person has to talk about where they grad from high school, right? So
Yeah.
I grad from Mililani back in '83. I actually started my accounting career in auditing. I was an auditor at a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I got exposed to some really super interesting things. I was one of the things that we did was we did litigation support, and so we
Mhm.
did criminal defense for people who were accused of tax evasion or other tax crimes, and so that was some really interesting experience. And so I went from there. I got hired as the controller for the Honolulu Board of Realtors, and so I worked there for about a year and a half. And then I got some offers to work for some startups, and of course, get stock options in my eyes. Thought, I was, going to be a millionaire if I worked for one of these companies. Unfortunately, like many startups, it kind of fizzled out. And then so I decided to go on my own. I ran a practice assisting realtors and their clients. I started in 2009. And then, I found myself doing more and more HARPTA and FERPTA work. And so I made the decision about a year and a half ago to kind of shrink my tax practice to a very small circle of people and just focus mainly on HARPTA and FERPTA issues, because it was something that was we were getting more and more work. And so I wanted to get you're talking about the one thing that was the one thing that I really wanted to get good at. And so that's what we've been doing for for the last we started HARPTA Help LLC, our company, in January. But I've been doing HARPTA filing since 2009. And so that's kind of my background. That's how I got here.
And you're coming to us as a recommendation from Will Tanaka. He's the president of First Hawaii Title. I'm sure all the title companies are well aware of what you have to offer. And from earlier, you had mentioned that you do a lot of teaching for the Honolulu Board of Realtors.
Yep. I teach a GRI class. A GRI. Well, I should say I'm going to be actually transitioning out of that. But since 2004, I've been a GRI instructor for the Hawaii Association of Realtors. I teach a class called Residential Real Estate Tax Rules, 1031 Exchange, and Foreign Investors. And so been teaching that since 2004, and I really enjoy doing that. Teaching.
Well, we enjoy learning, and we learned so much from you. We had you on as a guest on our show, and that's going to be airing this weekend. So we're excited to share that with our listeners. And I guess just like the purpose of this Friday Live is just, to go a little deeper.
Okay.
Go a little deeper on what we've already learned.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we've already mentioned about 28 acronyms, and so we need to give an explanation to all of those acronyms.
Yeah.
Why don't we start off with, I like, talking about taxes, withholdings, all of that good stuff. Most people would be like, I'd rather have ground crushed glass in my eyeballs than talk about this stuff. So we like to just liven up a bit. My definition of HARPTA is like Thanksgiving when you eat a lot of turkey and you feel real gassy and you feel like, oh, HARPTA. But that's not what that is. help us understand what is HARPTA. Let's start with the basics.
Okay. HARPTA stands for Hawaii Real Property Tax Act. And it's been a rule that's been on the books for a while. I think even before I became a CPA. And essentially, the purpose of this rule was, Hawaii as a state is responsible for collecting taxes from people who have income and who have gains on the sale of property. And when it came to real estate, what was happening prior to HARPTA was the state was seeing people who are Hawaii non-residents selling Hawaii real estate, and then taking their gains and then disappearing. So, Hawaii, as a way of preventing this from happening, as a result of securing the tax revenue that they should be receiving, what they did was they put this HARPTA rule into place. And what this HARPTA rule does is basically it secures the state of Hawaii in that it makes sure that Hawaii collects before the tax bill becomes due. So here's a way I kind of describe HARPTA in many ways is let's just say, so you had a garden in your yard, and every once in a while somebody would come in to your yard and they'd take your vegetables or whatever. So you decided to do something about it. So instead of putting up, let's say a 4-foot fence or something which would help and be adequate enough to do the job, HARPTA is in many ways is like putting up a 12-foot fence or 12-foot wall with barbed wire on the top. So it's essentially it's something that's done to protect the state of Hawaii, but it's in many ways is overkill. What HARPTA is if you have somebody who is a Hawaii non-resident who is selling Hawaii real estate, basically this withholding will take 7.25% of the gross sales price, and the escrow will hold on to it, and after closing they'll send it to the state of Hawaii. That amount is held in credit to the taxpayer. So the taxpayer can go ahead and prove their actual tax liability is less than what was withheld. And at that point, the state is obligated to provide them with a refund.
So Brad, didn't recently, just in the last couple of years, that withholding went up from 5 to, was it 7.5?
7.25%. Yeah, it jumped up a couple of years ago, and that kind of caught a lot of people by surprise. It even caught me by surprise. At that time, I wasn't following bills that were going through the legislature, and all of a sudden when it happened, it's like, wow. I was doing a lot of HARPTA filings prior to it jumping up to 7.25%, and even at 5%. One of the things that I found was that it was more than adequate enough for easily 95% of the clients who came to see me. Enough.
I want to share with you, Brad. We had a secret recording down at the legislation at the Hawaii Tax Department, and it was a recording of two brothers deciding to raise the rate and why they do this. So here's the recording. Oh, we gotta raise this rate. It's too low. Oh, how come we gotta raise them? Oh, these people, they sell their house and they leave Hawaii and then they still owe us taxes. We gotta grab some of that taxes. So we gotta make them 7.25. Okay, that was the recording, and the people are like, why this tax? And it's like you said in the beginning, people were selling their properties, they're out of here, and then the Hawaii has to go chase them down because they owe them tax. The state of Hawaii taxes.
I think though with the average price of our homes, and it's off
a lot of money.
Gross, not the net. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? You'd have to owe a lot of taxes to max that out.
It's true, and from a purely numbers perspective, our for capital gains, which is the type of tax that is assessed when somebody holds a house for more than a year and sells it, capital gains tax applies. Hawaii's maximum capital gains tax rate is 7.25%, and HARPTA is 7.25%. So in many ways, the HARPTA assumes the worst, absolute worst scenario, and in almost every single case, that's certainly not really what's happening. And one of the things that we talked about, Adrian, when we spoke on Wednesday, is I said, a lot of the clients who come to see us, they're selling their house here in Hawaii, and they're hoping to get the funds so that they can buy a house maybe on the mainland where they are. But when you have 30, 40, 50,000 or more that is withheld from those funds that should be put back in your pocket, it will severely limit the what you can really shop for in the location where you're planning to buy. So
Yeah.
it hurts. It hurts.
So I noticed on your website you said that you can shorten those times to 8 weeks and under in many cases.
Well, before we skip to the refund, let's go up the food chain a little bit. Let's talk about waivers and reductions.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to deal with HARPTA before closing, and that's either waivers or reductions. And let me talk about some of the circumstances that would cause a waiver to happen. You can get a waiver for essentially, I'd say in almost all of our cases, the waivers fall into one of two categories. Number one is if you're selling for a loss. If you're selling the home and you're experiencing a legitimate tax loss, you can get a waiver if you can prove to the state that it's actually a tax loss. The second one would be if the homeowner falls under what's called Section 121 gain rules. And let me explain that, because it's a federal tax rule that Hawaii also follows. And it's one of the really, really big, important tax rules for people who own real estate and live in their home as a main home. And essentially what this rule says is this. Is if you own a property and in the 5 years preceding the date of sale, you lived in it as your main home for at least 2 years, and you owned it for at least 2 years. And then the third requirement is you could not have used this gain exclusion within the prior 2 years. If you're a single filer, you can exclude the first up to $250,000 of gain on the sale. If you're married, you can exclude up to $500,000. We have a situation in Hawaii where military service members who are stationed in Hawaii, many times they don't have to. Well, depending on their where their home state is and where they signed up and where they choose to be the state of legal residency. If they are not a legal residency of a legal resident of Hawaii, they're going to be subject to HARPTA. But if they meet those Section 121 rules, and we can prove to the state that they meet those Section 121 rules, we can get that HARPTA waived. And so that kind of covers waivers.
Brad, what about like if you're an investor and you're doing a 1031 exchange, do you still have to withhold for the HARPTA? How does that work?
Oh, that's a good question, and that's something that we don't usually handle, because there's usually one of two ways to handle it if you're doing a 1031 exchange. And a 1031 exchange is a specific type of transaction where somebody who owns income producing property is exchanging that property and replacing it with another property. And so if you're doing a 1031 exchange and you're not pulling any money out of the transaction, essentially what happens is you don't even need to hire somebody like me. There's a form that escrow gives to the seller at that point, or the person who's doing the exchange. And if that person says that they're subject to the 120 or the 1031 rules, they can get an immediate waiver. So that number one. However, one of the things to keep in mind is that if somebody is doing a 1031, but they pull cash out of the transaction, then HARPTA might be due in the entire amount, as if there was no 1031 exchange. So that's something to keep in mind.
Could be triggered by that. All right. So, and Adrian was jumping the gun on that because she's like, okay, so you come home, the kids got chocolate all over the face. There's no way around it. They're busted. They went eat the chocolate that you're not supposed to eat. There's no waiver of the chocolate. There's no reduction of the chocolate that we ate. We're going to have chocolate removed from our next chocolate eating session, the sale of our home. I'm trying to just use simple analogies. So that's it. How do we do with the refunds?
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just cover reduction.
Okay.
So if somebody is selling a home, and this is another situation where somebody might get special treatment of HARPTA before closing, is if somebody is selling a home and they're in a situation where they would need to bring cash to closing, just to sell their home, what they can do is they can apply for a HARPTA reduction. And in many cases, the state of Hawaii will allow that. And the reason why is that the state of Hawaii does not want to be
impeding the sale.
Yeah, exactly. They want commerce to happen, and they don't want to be the barrier to commerce happening. And so,
yes,
what they will do in many cases is allow for a reduction of HARPTA so that the transaction can take place.
I think we've actually had some firsthand experience with that, because we back in 06, 07, 08, we did probably 350 short sales. And some of those were for non-Hawaii residents, so we were able to,
get all sorts of waivers.
Get all the waivers and reductions and or eliminations. But all right, so damn the torpedoes, we're moving ahead. There's no way around it. You checked out all the tax code, every way, and now the escrow is going to and I was reading it and I forgot about this. It's not the seller's responsibility; it's the buyer's responsibility. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I get asked that question a lot. It's like, it's the seller's responsibility to pay. So why does the buyer have the responsibility, for HARPTA? And I've asked before some people who are who are a little bit knowledgeable about how legislation is put together. And I think the reason, at least this is what I've gathered, is that somebody has to be responsible for enforcing this, right? So if the person responsible for enforcing is also the person who's responsible for paying, you're not going to get a whole lot of enforcement, right?
Yeah.
So you have to make some other party responsible for the enforcement, and so that's why they've made the buyer the enforcer.
Plus, you know what about the buyer? We know where they live. They're buying the house. So there's probably some logic in that, even though I'm making it a funny haha. And it's like they're a captive audience as opposed to somebody who's moving to Bangladesh.
That's also a good point. They're easier to find. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about we have the sellers. I don't know if state of Hawaii anything. Well, we still got to withhold it, and you need to prove that you don't owe anything. So talk about proving it, and then the next steps, and then getting the money back.
Okay, sure. So, a large part of our business too is obtaining refunds, HARPTA refunds for people who couldn't get either a waiver or a reduction. And so the way to get a refund is to actually prove to the state of Hawaii that your tax obligation is less than the amount that they're withholding. So let me explain this. Let's say you go through the sales process and escrow withholds $50,000 of HARPTA. And escrow takes that, they send it to the state. The state is holding it on credit for the taxpayer, $50,000. But when you crunch the numbers and you take a look and see what the actual gain was, and then what the tax on that gain was, and let's say it comes out to $5,000, right? So the state is holding on to $50,000, but your actual tax liability is $5,000. At that point, the state is obligated to refund $45,000, which is the difference between the two numbers. And so, what we do is we help to prove to the state what the home seller's actual tax liability is, so that we can get them a refund. And so the refund usually takes somewhere 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes it can extend longer. It really depends kind of where in the cycle that we are.
So Brad, rather than waiting until the taxes are all completed, you guys can go in and prove to the state, hey, this is all that's owed. Please refund the rest.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. So towards the end of the year, our business, insofar as getting refunds, kind of drops off a little bit, and that's understandable, because some people may choose, rather than file for an early refund, well, I'll just wait until March or April of the following year. I'll do my Hawaii tax returns then, and we'll get our refund back that way. So that happens as well.
We did a survey of people in that situation, and what we found is that because of the click and buy on Amazon, and their lack of discipline of consumerism, that they prefer to let the state hold on to their money until after Christmas. No, that's not the reason, but whatever. People don't need the money. I think the point you're making for our realtors out there when you're advising clients, you need to know what their end strategy is, because if somebody's looking to sell to buy and then 40 grand is being held up by the state of Hawaii, that will be a little bit of a monkey wrench on that one.
Yeah.
So proper planning. Can people reach out to you and just do a initial consultation?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll do an initial consultation over the phone or over Zoom, or any way they can even come to meet me in my office. Although
Yeah.
ask them to wear a mask.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know what? We almost never get people coming to our office, and
Yeah.
the reason why is that our clients are generally on the mainland
Yeah.
or overseas. So we don't have. I think since the beginning of this year, not counting my income tax clients, I think we've had only 1 or 2 people actually show up here to either get documents or deliver documents. So yeah, but if they want to talk, I'll be more than happy. Free consultation. I'll give them the options. That's something that I think is important, is that they understand what their options are.
Mm-hmm. Adrian?
There's also like a lot of great resources that you have on your website that people can kind of click around and see if there's a FAQ that addresses their situation, and that way they spend their time better with you, right? Because they've done that initial education part.
Yes.
You even have videos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? If a client, if somebody who wants to learn a little bit about this, and I understand, sometimes reading, reading things about taxes, it's not really the most interesting thing for most people. But a lot of people would prefer not to do it. They'd rather just talk to somebody. If clients are the type, or prospective clients are the type, they don't really want to read any of this stuff. They want to just hear it from a person. I'll be glad to instruct them and teach them a little bit about taxes and what some of the, gain a little bit of understanding about what it is that we do.
I want to go ahead, Adrian.
Brad, one thing on the forms, I know that we had talked about this on the radio show. The forms are written for not for lay people, but for accountants type people that understand these accounting terms. And we come across this all the time, that the clients aren't sure, how to properly answer. So is this another service as well that you guys offer, that you'll help, during escrow to fill out the forms properly?
You know what, when it comes to actually instructing them to fill out the forms properly, yeah, we
that's that would be like calling a brain surgeon and I'm trying to do brain surgery on my head right now. Could you give me a couple tips? No, you go into the operating room and have the brain surgeon perform the procedure, I think is what you're trying to get at.
Exactly. It's where we're either all in or not involved at all. So
So once the client gets the forms, they're actually sent to your firm, and you guys help properly fill it out, because
I think once they decide that they're going to be selling and moving to the mainland, or at some point that they are not a Hawaii resident and they're just remotely thinking about it, they should be having a conversation with you to see what that's about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get me involved early, because there are, if you're hoping to get a HARPTA waiver or HARPTA reduction, there is a deadline to file, and that deadline is no later than 10 business days prior to closing. So so if somebody is thinking about either getting a waiver or reduction, and they think they might be able to get one, then call me early, because it's important to plan these things, because you certainly don't want to, and I've seen this happen more than once, where somebody calls in and it's like, oh man, we're helping you get a refund, but if you had called me during the contract phase, when it's escrow, we could have gotten a waiver and we wouldn't even have this, trying to get back your money. You'd have all your money.
Yeah. I think so. Here's a tip for you realtors out there, because we know we have a lot of realtors that tune into our informative channels here, is put that part of your intake. Ask them if they're a Hawaii resident or not. Don't make any assumptions on that. I mean, guilty, it's bit us on the butt when we didn't, because the everyday layperson is like, they get up in the morning and what you doing today? I'm going to play some golf, and then, I'm going to study HARPTA. Who does that? Nobody.
No one
What
does
is HARPTA? It's like we're gathering around at Thanksgiving. What'd you do this weekend? Oh, I was looking at HARPTA. What'd you do? Oh, I was I was thinking about getting an electric bike. But it's it's not common language. It can come bite you in the butt. So early, often, get in front of a professional. Let's talk about the one thing. There is a book called The One Thing, and what it talks about is focusing and doing one thing. Why did you decide to focus on HARPTA and FERPTA as a CPA?
You know what's so funny is that over the years as a as a CPA, I've seen the Internal Revenue Code and also the Hawaii Tax Code get more and more and more complex, and it's really to the point where I think just as attorneys, you have employment attorneys and you have litigators, and you have different areas of specialty, and the doctors as well. I think tax preparers have really gotten frustrated to the point where there's so many things that they're responsible for learning that it's really hard to be super knowledgeable in all those areas, right?
Yes.
So as I started to get more people calling me about HARPTA and FERPTA, I decided, you know what? I just want to be really, really good at this one thing, and I want to know everything about it. And so we've over the last couple of years since I got the domain name, I've really made it a point to dig in deep and know everything that I can.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty bold that you got the acronym as your website, HARPTA.com. That was a pretty good one.
And he goes by Mr. HARPTA.
Mr. HARPTA. When he's at the airport and people are trying to get a hold of him, they're like, Dr. HARPTA, please go to the next courtesy phone. Thank you so much. We're kind of want to wrap it up. I think you've brought some clarity. Prior to this live streaming, people thought HARPTA was when you ate a lot of turkey at Thanksgiving and we're feeling a little gaseous, you'd be like HARPTA. And prior to this live streaming, people thought FERPTA was like what happens to you when you drink a lot of beer and you're in between things. So thank you for providing clarity on the tax withholding for non-residents and foreigners.
A lot of people think that it's like not a withholding, that it's more, I have to give this to the state.
But it's not.
They don't give it back, right?
No, it's for those taxpayers, that money is held in credit for you. So plan around that fact.
And there's no interest on it, right? It's not interest bearing or any of that stuff, right? I could be wrong.
In theory, it's supposed to be interest bearing, but they don't really interest on it.
Yeah. Okay, here's the recording again. Oh, you know what? If they don't ask for the interest bearing, we're not going to give them. Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, maybe they're not going to know them. But anyway, so the point being is that understand what it is. We actually have clients that we're going to be talking with later on this week that are concerned about it, and it's affecting whether or not they want to sell the property. So thank you so much for bringing some clarity to that. That might be a client that maybe our first.
That we're going to send your way.
That we're going to send your way, because here's what we do know: HARPTA is your one thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Any other questions we should have asked that we didn't ask?
You know what? I think we covered the spectrum of it, and this this has been a good time to get that knowledge out. I really enjoyed it, and I want to thank the both of you, for having me on.
Yeah, I think also too, we're going to have you. We do a morning huddle via Zoom. We're going to invite you to, if you could, spend some time educating our team, so that they can get the word out to the clients that they get in front of, and like, guess what? We got a solution for your lack of understanding of the situation. I'm going to have you call this number 737-4412, or send an email, or go to this website and give Bradley a call. Adrian, anything else?
No, just thank you so much for taking your time for the radio show and doing this this live stream. It's been very informative for me, just to kind of brush up and understand these particular situations, learning from the master of HARPTA.
This is the one thing. You're like the Mr. Miyagi. You're like HARPTA on, HARPTA off. HARPTA on, HARPTA off. You're like the Mr. Miyagi of the HARPTA and the FERPTA.
Waiver.
Reduction. So, all right. So I'm going to hit we're going to be ending the broadcast. So we're going to, just like at KH